is multiculturalism really our biggest strength? My next guest has argued that this time of year reveals the complete failure of multiculturalism and integration within the UK, saying if you walk through any park or common on a summer's day, you'll see 90+% of people racially self-segregating. Joining me now is historian and senior fellow at the New Culture Forum, Rafe Heydel-Mankoo. Rafe, thank you very much for joining us. Rafe, I read your tweet that said this with interest. I just wanted you to explain a bit more about what you mean.
Yes, well, look, barely a day goes past now when you don't hear from, a minister or a mayor or a police commissioner that diversity is our greatest strength, that Britain is a great multicultural success story. And it's become really the established narrative amongst our political and our media class. And woe betide you if you question that. But I'm afraid the sociological evidence, and we have years of sociological evidence, simply doesn't support that. On the contrary, it suggests quite strongly that far from being a strength, the super diversity we now experience in this country is actually a weakness rather than strength. And that's for various reasons. I mean, we've seen some dramatic scenes regarding that in recent days and weeks. But more importantly, people in this country, because of diversity and mass immigration, it's embedded racial segregation into our country, with the majority of people living in racial silos in this country. And, this is, as a result of all that, our United Kingdom is fast becoming a United Nations. And it's not just a British phenomenon. In America, 91% of white people and up to 80% of black people do not have interracial circles of friends. And, the great way to test this is during the summer months. As you said, I'm with the New Culture Forum. I specialize in immigration and integration, multiculturalism and diversity. And, I travel around the country, and so I'm always paying keen attention to the levels of diversity in towns and cities and the ways in which people are interacting. And if you just go out, anyone can go out today to the park in the center of their town, and they will see around 85 to 90% of the people in parks and commons and at festivals are actually self-segregating. You'll have whites, you'll have blacks, you'll have Chinese, you'll have Indians, and you'll have Pakistanis and Bangladeshis. And it's a global phenomenon, and it's actually part of human nature. We need to be alert to what's happening here, because we're actually fragmenting our society and weakening the bonds that unite neighborhoods and communities together. So social cohesion is being damaged by the natural reality of people wanting to cleave to one another.
Rafe, it's interesting because at the same time as I read your tweet, I was watching a clip from the BBC about a 17-year-old girl who grew up in the same area as I did in East London. And she made an interesting point. She goes, I look round about my friendship group, and she happens to be black, and she goes, we didn't have any white friends. So she started investigating about why her group of 17-year-olds, why they didn't have any white friends. And she really couldn't find an answer to it, and she was confused herself. But is it the fact that we're tribal creatures, or will this change in the future?
Well, it is human nature. And, for example, I know several people in Dubai who've been there for 20 years. Their entire social circle is English. We know, of course, there are English enclaves in Spain where they don't know anybody else who's not English, don't make any effort to speak the language. It is part of human nature. But the great sad reality is that in the 1990s and the 2000s, Britain was actually moving towards a status of being colorblind and of having racial integration, because we only had immigration of 50,000 per year compared to 700,000 now. And when you have such vast quantities of people coming over here who automatically segregate in their own communities, have their own shops, have their own, watch their own satellite TV stations, in their schools now, up to 90% or more of the pupils will be from one ethnic minority or another, becoming the ethnic majority in those towns. In fact, in parts of the north of England, polls have shown that some children have thought Britain was a majority Asian country because that's all that they see around there. So because of that, it's not surprising that people aren't integrating as much. And also now, because of the aggressive way in which diversity has been pushed, DEI, unconscious bias training, we know that that's backfired. It's made people more more tense, more awkward, more sensitive about race. They see race where once they didn't do that. And so we know, for example, that even when people do have friends of a different race, they'll be less likely to discuss politically sensitive issues. So it's quite easier, actually, to self-segregate. Now, of course, there are exceptions. I understand full well that many people do have, ethnic minority friends or white friends if they are an ethnic minority. But in terms of your genuine friends, the people that you go on holiday with, the people you spend your weekends with, the people you could phone in the middle of the night if you have an issue or you're worried, or you can borrow money from, those are primarily from your own racial background.
Very interesting point, sir. Rafe, thank you very much. That's our Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum, Rafe Heydel-Mankoo. Thank you very much for joining us on